Time now for CCTV-America Inside. Our focus today, what started as a humanitarian effort that went horribly wrong. 20 years ago, the UN was trying to get desperately needed food to Somalia, where thousands were dying of starvation. At the same time, U.S. forces led a military operation into Mogadishu to take down a local warlord who had ambushed and killed 24 UN peacekeepers. That military operation wasn't expected to take long, but a U.S. helicopter was shot down and everything changed. Backup troops tried to reach the crash site. They were split up and became lost. They were shot at, and then a second U.S. helicopter went down. The troops had to fight their way out, leaving 18 Americans dead, along with hundreds of Somalis. The impact is still being felt today, as CCTV's Mohammed Hermogay reports.
Most people here are too young to remember what happened on 3rd October 1993. And officials in this city are trying to portray the capital as one that's rapidly rebuilding. But Mogadishu is still living with the legacy of the battle 20 years ago. After the fight, the international community largely turned its back, and Somalia descended into years of fighting and famine. Recently, the African Union force AMISOM helped stabilize the city, but there are many parts of Mogadishu that still remain the preserve of gunmen. The Bakara market, where the Americans fought 20 years ago today, is one of them. These days, though, it's not so much warlords or militia causing the trouble. It's Al-Qaeda allied group, Al-Shabaab. Mohammed Mogi, CCTV, Mogadishu.
And it is not just Somalia that is still feeling the impacts of what happened 20 years ago. The same can be said for U.S. foreign policy. CCTV's Callebs has insight on that part of the story.
In October of 1993, the moment a Somali RPG brought a U.S. Black Hawk helicopter down, it was as if all will, desire, and political support for the U.S. mission in the East African country evaporated.
Well, I think the Black Hawk Down incident in Somalia was very traumatic for the United States. I think it had a chilling effect on the U.S. desire to be in East Africa. 18 U.S. troops were killed, more than 70 injured. Within months, all U.S. forces were out of the country. In its wake, an atmosphere of lawlessness has flourished, creating an environment for Islamist insurgents to thrive. J. Peter Pham is director of the Africa Center at the Atlantic Council, a nonpartisan foreign policy think tank.
Absent a government in Somalia that's truly capable of asserting its authority, they have a safe haven in Somalia out of which they can attack vulnerable spots throughout the region.
That, he says, is exactly what the world saw unfold when Al-Shabaab inflicted its method of terror on a lightly guarded high-end shopping mall in Nairobi, Kenya. Al-Shabaab maintains it lashed out because Kenya is among the African Union countries with troops on the ground in Somalia. In many ways, experts say, chaos and unrest in Somalia is one of the legacies of the failed U.S. mission 20 years ago. And this latest attack is expected to keep the U.S. and others from investing in East Africa.
I worked for Secretary Rumsfeld at the Pentagon, and he used to say, money's a coward. Money flees instability. And what you see now is a situation that's not secure in East Africa.
The stated U.S. purpose in Mogadishu, Somalia 20 years ago was trying to rush food and other aid to hundreds of thousands of people starving in the region. But the U.S. learned the hard way. Trying to implement Western philosophy throughout the world can backfire in a big way. And backing the wrong leader can be deadly. Amira Woods is an expert on U.S. policy in African and developing nations.
After the experience of Black Hawk Down, what we hope the U.S. would have learned was to not choose leaders for the people of Somalia, that people around the world, wherever they may be, want to freely choose their leaders and hold those leaders accountable.
And Sean Callebs joins us live here on the set. And Sean, it's incredible to think what might have happened if this had not occurred in Mogadishu. It really did impact U.S. foreign policy, didn't it?
Yeah, and not only that, if you look at some of the real horrific violence that happened in Central Africa, what went down in the Rwanda area right after this, I mean, this was on the heels of the Mogadishu tragedy. The U.S., other international agencies, they did not send troops in. They did not send anybody in to help that ethnic fighting where as many as 1 million people were basically butchered. And people in the U.S., people in other areas, they were just tired of seeing U.S. troops, seeing troops caught up in a humanitarian effort and then killed. if this didn't happen, maybe things would have been different there.
Well, what I think is so seared in the memories of Americans was watching those images of the Americans being dragged through the streets. And really, the war came home to them, in a sense, right there on their TVs. And that really had a huge impact, didn't it?
Yeah, without question. And then if you think about the big movie in 2001, Black Hawk Down, I think a lot of people confuse that as like a historical, fact rather than, something they saw at theaters. But it was horrible. And it was something a lot of people, a lot of military wanted to just go back in and hit Mohammed Farah Aidid, the warlord who was behind all that, hit him hard. But then the Clinton administration decided to cut bait, said we're getting all the troops out of there. That happened by March of next year, and the U.S. involvement in Mogadishu was history.
And still maybe part of what's going on with Syria today. Thank you so much. Certainly appreciate it.